All right, let's do this. Hey everybody, how's it going? You ready for one more taco than tacos? I'm ready for some tacos. All right. So hey, hi, I am Potch. I am a developer advocate at Mozilla, where I've worked for 6.5 years, the last 2 as a developer advocate. Mozilla is a purveyor of fine web browsing technology for over 15 years. And you may know us from the beginning of every single user agent string in every browser on the market. And actually, speaking of user agents, I'm going to be talking to you today about the retro future of user agents and how we got to where we are and where we might be headed. So I'm going to actually start with a little video demonstration. In September of 1990, 3 months before Tim Berners-Lee sent out a mailing list message saying, wouldn't it be cool if we had this thing called the World Wide Web? So 3 months before that, the BBC released a short documentary called Hyperland, starring Douglas Adams and Tom Baker, who was the 4th Doctor. And they explored the idea of interactive, interlinked television, which made sense because it was a TV program. And I want to show you a short little clip from that documentary to sort of see, before the web was anything, what we thought the web might be. So I'm just going to...
Also in tonight's program, the greenhouse effect really starts to bite.
Yes, but this is anything new.
From St. Martin's Square.
Still the same boring old television.
The England cricket team is in deep trouble.
Are you tired of linear, non-interactive television, Mr. Adams? Don't even know what linear, non-interactive television means, Mr. Adams? Are you tired, Mr. Adams, of the sort of television that just happens at you? That you just sit in front of like a couch potato? That doesn't involve you? Come on, interact with me.
Wait a minute.
Yes, what is it you want to know?
Who the hell are you?
Me? Oh, I'm just him.
My name is Tom, and I'm your agent. May I ask if you know what that means?
You want 15%?
It means that I'm here to do your every slightest bidding, to fetch and carry for you, to work tirelessly and selflessly on your behalf, always ready, always willing, no job too small or too menial.
Are you sure you mean agent?
I mean that I'm a software agent. I am merely a simulacrum, an artificial and completely customizable personality, and I only exist as what we call an application in your computer. I have the honor to provide instant access to every piece of information stored digitally anywhere in the world. Any picture or film, any sound, any book, any statistic, any fact,
Any connection between anything you care to think of, you have only to tell me, and it will be my humble duty to find it for you and to present it to you for your interactive pleasure. Is there anything I can do for you now, Mr. Adams, sir?
well, yes, you stop being so obsequious and stuff. It will be my very great and profound pleasure to be less obsequious, O Master. I am, as I humbly mentioned to you a moment ago, fully customizable. Allow me to present you with my control panel.
So already we have too many configuration options on our user agents, and the web browser doesn't even exist yet. It goes on to talk about interrelated video, and they have video playing with other animated icons flying in, and he clicks around, and there's a whole series of interviews. So the whole thing's on YouTube. I highly encourage you to check it out. If we're actually here, hang on a second. I just love this part.
Just touch the appropriate control.
Okay, Buster, what do you want now? Get a bloody move on, can't you?
Anyway, we'll move on. Do you think of your browser as your agent? How many of you think of your browser as sort of going around representing you, making deals, and going out there? You can show of hands or just arch of eyebrow. I have keen eyes. Cool. Okay, so approximately 0 of you. I'm here to posit to you that the experience of browsing the web is a negotiation between authors of web content, yourselves, and readers, also yourselves, and it's mediated by browsers. Browsers are going out there and getting you the best deal on new and recently used web content all the time, every single time you use a browser. And I'm going to talk to you about how they've done it from the start, some new ways we're doing it now, and some stuff that is just coming down the pipe that is very fuzzy and future-shaped. So how do user agents represent us online? Back in the beginning, from the coining of the HTTP standard, browsers have represented us online via headers. I assume you're all somewhat familiar with headers on requests and responses. This is a normal request to a web page, and I'm going to dig into it just a little bit. Starting off with that user agent string that I mentioned. How many of you are familiar with the history of the user agent string? Anyone? This is a fantastic blog post. I'm cribbing a little bit of history here from. So in the beginning, there was Mosaic. And it said, I'm Mosaic, and I run on Windows 3.1. It was very straightforward, and web browsers used that information. Along came an upstart challenger to Mosaic, known as Netscape. Netscape saw itself as the Mosaic killer, so using the old school, Latinate stuff, they called themselves Mozilla 1.0, and they also ran on 3.1, and they presented two very different faces to the web. One of them Mosaic, one of them Netscape. Then came along Internet Explorer, and it wanted to get all the cool web pages that Netscape got, because Netscape was really getting traction, really was becoming a Mosaic killer. So it called itself Mozilla and said it was compatible. It was Mozilla compatible. And it was IE2, and it ran on Windows 95. Eventually, Mozilla came along and replaced Netscape after Netscape went out of business. They decided to open source their code, which I'm very appreciative of because it's given me a salary for 6.5 years. And on top of that, we built an open source browser that was called the Mozilla Suite. And it also called itself Mozilla, this time, for the first time, correctly. And eventually, the rendering engine was replaced with a new rendering engine called Gecko. So we told web pages, hey, if you can do any of the cool stuff that Gecko can do, we're Gecko. Just give us those good pages. Other browsers came along and said, we are trying to compete with Mozilla, but first we evolved into Firefox. So we're still Mozilla. We still run. We do all of these wonderful things. We have all this metadata. We're Gecko, but now we're also Firefox. We're the Gecko-based browser called Firefox, which is built from Mozilla. So then comes along Safari, and they say, we really, really want all the pages that websites are giving us. So we're also Mozilla. We're like Gecko, and we would like the same pages, please. Then comes along Chrome, forked from there, and they say, we're also Mozilla, and we're also WebKit, and we're also like Gecko, and we're also Chrome and Safari at the same time. So please give us all of those pages. Along came Edge just recently, and they are Mozilla, WebKit, KHTML like Gecko, Chrome, Safari, and themselves. So over time, we just built this sedimentary rock layer where everyone came and said, I want all the good stuff. And if you've ever, there's this great bug that happened to, it happened to Chrome, it happened to Firefox in particular, and it just happened to IE, where Windows became Windows 10. And all the regexes that were looking for web pages, to see what version of websites we should give everyone, saw Windows 1, and the regex didn't have a second digit in there. So some Windows 10 users are actually getting outdated browser. Safari just flipped over to Safari 10, and a bunch of websites broke. Firefox had this happen. We call it the turning 10 syndrome when we do web compatibility stuff. Long story short, please stop regex checking user agents. This is what we're trying to say here. We'd love to stop, putting a micro history of the entirety of browsers in every browser just to get a web page that doesn't think we're on a WAP phone. So consider that if you take nothing else away from the rest of this talk, you could leave right now and be like, we're going to stop checking the user agent string, and I'd be so happy. So next up, we have the accept headers. And the accept headers are a way of the browser goes out and says, this is the kind of stuff I know how to interpret. It tends to be a really long list. I have it overflow hidden here just for brevity's sake. But you can see right in there, and actually in the accept language field, these little queue parameters. Anyone know what the queue is? It is the preference weight. Actually, every time your web browser makes a request, it goes, I would really like text, text HTML, application XML HTML, application XML. That's the one I prefer the most. It's Q09. I'll take anything else, but I prefer it slightly less. Same thing. If you go in, you can actually say what order you want to prefer your languages. You can say, I really want US English. I'll take ENGB if I have to. I can delete the U's myself. And then anything generically in English would also be fine. And then there's an implicit, if you don't have any of that, give me what you've got. We can also accept encodings, gzip and deflate, ways we can compress this stuff over the wire. This one's really important. If your browser doesn't support gzip and you've got a binary compressed version of a web page, you have a really bad time. In fact, Brotli, which is a brand new compression algorithm, has now joined this group, and it's very important that we say, I understand Brotli, because some modern browsers do, some don't. We have cookies, which is last time I visited your server, you gave me a bunch of stuff to remember. Here's what it was. And then some newly standardized things, like I would prefer if you didn't track me, though there's nothing binding about this. This is sort of the UN resolution of headers. And then a bunch of other stuff. So, keep the connection open. We're going to send a bunch of stuff down. It's fine if you do that. If there's insecure requests and you have a secure domain, let's go straight over to HTTPS. This one's pretty cool. Right now I want to disable the cache. So don't give me anything cached. You get response. OK, here's our responses. Here's the encoding it's in. A content security policy, which is really cool. This is relatively new. You can say, the browser will only execute scripts if they come from myself, Mozilla.net, Mozilla.org, Mozilla.com. Images, we'll only accept them from ourselves, Mozilla.net, Mozilla.org, Mozilla.com. Data, we can accept JavaScript and stuff like that from a couple trusted partners that we've already gone through and said, this is the libraries we want. If you're not using content security policy, you should. It lets you more or less defeat XSS. You can say, no inline scripts on my page. And if someone injects an inline script, the browser won't run it and logs a security error. It's really infuriating if you've set this and forgotten. But the causal effect is if you're only pulling in scripts via a script tag, no injected script tag will be able to execute unless you've whitelisted it or sort of said, I'm allowing unsafe scripts on the page. You can turn off eval entirely. Pretty cool. All kinds of sort of new security conscious stuff. And then a whole bunch of other information about, whether or not I should cache this and whether or not the browser should allow this page to be framed. If you've ever tried to iframe something and just gotten a white screen, it's because modern browsers will actually let servers say, I don't want to be iframed. This is sort of a negotiation in the author's favor. And then protection against cross-site scripting and all kinds of stuff. So far what I've described is this has been there since the very beginning, this sort of header-based exchange of stuff. You open with an offer, and then the web server responds with its response, and hopefully they match. And if they match, a web page is drawn. This is what I mean by the user agent. The agent is out there doing a bunch of stuff that you don't want to have to do, handling the dirty work, striking deals to get you content. A lot of times we think of sites, or we think of a web browser as a runtime. Stuff comes down from a server and we run it. I don't think we want to be in the company of runtimes as browsers. Runtimes sometimes come with free browser add-ons from ask.com. And I don't think that's really the thing that browsers want to be, because we really want to do stuff on behalf of the user. At the end of the day, we're running on the user's computer, and we are beholden to the user, and the user will switch to another user agent if they're displeased. So I know we're in the era of the single-page web app, but the web was built, and is still built, out of documents with semantically structured content. That's a couple words that all have specific meanings. Documents meaning a page that comes down, a primary entry point, a .html file, a .xhtml file, if you're still into that. And that page contains tags, and those tags have meaning. That meaning may all be divs, if you come from the early React school. It may be a WebGL canvas. But all those tags have meaning. Ideally, you have things like titles and headers and sections and all the new wonderful HTML5 elements that describe how your page is made up. And that stuff really matters to web browsers because we have internal mechanics to understand what's going on there. And it really matters to other tools as well. So there is this notion of extremely semantic markup, which I'm going to go off into just very briefly. How many of you are familiar with sort of microdata or RDF? Yeah, I promise we'll be quick. So this is an unmarked up, this is just very simple markup. It's an introduction to a man named John Doe, who went to the University of Dreams, which I liked a lot. That comes from, thank you, Wikipedia. And this contains a ton of information. Who this person is, what they do, where they do it, a nickname, where you can find them both online and in person. And granted, we can do all kinds of rich text analysis because it's the year 2016, and we just all walk around with briefcases full of GPUs, and we can just extract glean every bit of information. But if you wanted to be explicit, there is a way to do that. It's called schema.org, and it's unspeakably verbose. However, if you do that, now take a look at what we've got here. We've got this marking that what's within here is all scoped, and that scope is a person. There's actually a way of describing a person. Schema.org is this open consortium of metadata where you can actually say, I want to describe an HTML5 block as an item. And within there, we can see it's got a name, a job title, their affiliation, their additional name, where they can be found, the URL for them. And then also, within that, there's a secondary scope, which is the idea of describing a postal address. And so there's actually special things you can pull in just to use postal address. If you've ever done XML namespaces, looks very much like that, but the idea is to do it within HTML markup instead of around it. If you want to go even further, there is a thing called RDF, where as opposed to having a structured page, you literally write Joe works at University of Dreams. And the way that works, so it's all just triples. Everything is, you're describing a gigantic graph. This is really, really great if you want to build the Hyperland style advisor. If you want to render a page with any meaning whatsoever, I don't recommend it. Right when I thought RDF was how things were going to go, I picked up a book on ontologies and semiotics and XHTML and XSLT, because I really, for a minute there in the mid 2000s, it really seemed like the web was going to go in this very XML structured data that we then transition into a web page thing. It hasn't. Whether that's good or not, I will debate you over drinks. But here we are, we're making web pages that are still ultimately documents with visual presentations for now. So all that information is for computers, right? There is visual textual information and pictures and styles and like that are for the readers, and the readers are reading your site. But who else is reading your site? Search engines. I think we've all gotten very, very comfortable with the idea of search engine optimization and the idea of making things that are indexable by Google and making sure that you use links to relate things and you have enough content and you have a good title and stuff like that. So here's that Mozilla again in the Googlebot user agent string. These days, Googlebot is really just Chrome, by the way. That's why they're able to run JavaScript on your page. It used to be that the search engine indexing couldn't run JavaScript and couldn't get to that content. That's actually not true. However, they still will probably penalize you for taking 3 seconds to load your page in JavaScript, but now for performance reasons, not for scripting reasons. So still make sure that when someone curls your site, they get something. It's still really, really important, even in the era where we send down 2 megabytes of JavaScript first. Google doesn't just read your site for indexing it. You can see I did a search for banana bread recipe, which I always do, because I can never remember it, even though it's only 7 steps. And you can see that recently when I did it, as opposed to getting a list of recipes, at the top was a recipe from a site. So Google not only went in there and grabbed that, indexed the page for me to find it, but actually understood that somewhere within that page was the actual steps of the recipe. And that's because they used actually semantically meaningful markup. Google was able to go in there and find an ordered list with a list of items, so an ordered set of steps, and they were able to understand that and pull that out. And I'm not sure if food.com, given their site is absolutely plastered with ads, will be pleased that their secret recipe for banana bread was just on the page, and I never actually had to go to the site. But if you notice, there's no ingredients here, so there's still some surprising things if you click through. This is a relatively recent addition. Social networks are now reading your site. I assume you're all familiar with Twitter cards. Yeah? You may all be familiar with Facebook Open Graph. All that means is when you give them a URL, it's actually going and talking to the site, reading the site, and trying to figure out a richer way to display that content. So in this case, we have the Firefox test pilot, which is an awesome way to try out new features in Firefox and promotion, though the picture-in-picture video is really nice. And here we have it over here in Open Graph on Facebook. So what's happening here is if you are a good citizen of these social networks, you actually fill your head tag of your site with all this extra metadata. And what happens to that extra metadata is that we actually sites, Facebook and Twitter will pull that stuff in and display a much richer thing in line. This is really, really desirable if you want to catch someone's eye, or if you just want to include a little bit of extra information beyond the 140 characters on Twitter. You can pull in an image. You can specify a different image for Twitter and Facebook. This is all stuff that's pretty well defined. There's tons and tons of Facebook or WordPress plugins to do this, and documentation out there, because if you're in the marketing game, it's really important. However, it's these two competing non-standard-y standard things, right? We have this OG title, which is not schema.org. We have a Twitter title, and there's a lot of duplication that goes back and forth. This kind of stinks. There are tools out there, in fact, one built by a colleague of mine. Let's see if I can find it. You'd think I would have opened this ahead of time. Never mind. I won't waste your time. But it's a tool where you can enter the information once and it generates all the tags. If you're building from a CMS, you almost certainly have plugins that do this. But it's really surprisingly important in the year 2016 to have all this extra metadata. And I'm actually going to give a little demo. So we're going to go to Liberty.js, which is a pretty neat website. And we have a tool at Mozilla, there goes my slides, called Fathom, which Fathom is a rules engine of really the simplest, dumbest version of machine learning. And we wrote this because we were really sick of having to rely on third parties to do this information extraction for us. Because a lot of sites do provide Open Graph and Twitter card data, but a lot of sites don't. And if you want to do things like richer bookmarks or a better understanding of the page the user is on, maybe to make it so it's easier to find in the awesome bar, our URL bar, then you need to be able to extract this information. And not every site provides it. So we have Fathom, which lets us write, it's a node-based rules engine, and it lets you say, we used the JS DOM project underneath the hood, and we can find title tags on the page. We can find each of those tags and give them a score. And the flavors are just kind of a made-up thing that you provide. So we say, this looks titly, it's a title. But we also have the Open Graph title. That also looks titly, and in fact, it's probably more the thing that they want machines to read. So we're actually going to boost that and give it a higher score. So if we find an Open Graph title, we'll use that over. We really don't want to use anything that comes from that flavor if it's full of tags and dashes, because that means it's the full title, and we want the page title. So if it has colons or dashes, it means it's like article, colon, the New York Times, colon, tagline, right? We want to derank that in favor of something that has a much shorter, more succinct title. This is just a really sample rule from the Fathom GitHub repository. But we're actually using this already to try to build richer bookmarks. You bookmark something in Firefox, we record this information, we're working on a UI where we can display it with a little image and the title and the description to you locally. It gives you a better reminder of what you were visiting. So if we go to Liberty.js, they were very good citizens, and I have an extension installed that lets me actually flip open a metadata tag, and it actually runs these Fathom rules straight on the site. Barring some formatting, and it's a little messy, you can see we know that this is the Liberty.js website. We know it's the schedule. We pull that from the title tag. We know it's a website. We know their icon, and we know a primary image that we want to use. Some of this stuff was provided to us via Open Graph tags, and some of this information we determined from running rules on the page. We use this for more things than just that, but I'm not going to get to them quite yet. So that was my demo. Would you know that browsers also read your web page? There's a bunch of sort of lesser known ways in which browsers read your site and try to make sense of it. I'm going to just cover sort of the cursory, neat ones that I always forget about and then use. Any of you ever used a link rel search tag in your site when you're building a relatively large site? People familiar with this? OK. One's been around for probably 7 or 8 years. It's called OpenSearch. And you can actually say that this URL over here is the primary search interface for my site. So what that means is, if you go to a website, did I miss the image there? I totally did. Oh, that's embarrassing. OK. There it is. So that's really tiny. We're going to make this really big. All right, so you can see that if I go to the MDN site, we have an OpenSearch meta tag on the page. And if I go to search, I can actually add MDN directly as a search provider into Firefox. And we're not the only browser that supports this. That means that users can take sites that they search very frequently and access them directly from the browser without ever having to go back to the landing page of that site. It's really cool. It's been around forever. It's surprisingly underused, so I'm talking about it here. But this is a way where the browser can actually aid the user even more by discovering that there's a search tool here and letting the user opt in to having access directly to that search in the future. There's also link rel next and previous. If you are building a site that maybe has a big listing of search results, or a listing of products, or a listing of blog posts, you can actually say where the next and previous pages are. And both assistive technologies and a couple browsers will actually use that information to either start prefetching the next page, or you can surface some nice UI to the user and say, we're going to browse through these. This is mostly a hint for assistive technologies. It'd be cool if browsers actually just expose this information. Like, we give you big next and previous page buttons. I think that'd be pretty cool. Browsers also read your page for accessibility. I know there was an excellent talk about some accessibility stuff yesterday. Accessibility is for everyone. This is something I'd like to hammer home because I think it's something that should be hammered home at every one of these events. It's really easy to think of accessibility as the accommodation you make in your site. You go out of your way to accommodate people who can't see, or maybe have some mobility issues, or cannot hear, or just have some sort of visual impairment. This graphic is my favorite thing. I keep this around. I don't know if you can see that properly, but it talks about the notion of permanent accessibility needs, temporary accessibility needs, and on this side toward me, situational accessibility needs. So maybe you need a better touch interface that works for one-handed people because you have one hand. Maybe you hurt your arm, or maybe you're a new parent and you're holding a kid, and now it's really upsetting that the Maps app on your phone doesn't have double tap for zoom, because you're holding a baby, and that's how you need to be able to zoom. Maybe you're a distracted driver who really can't hunt and peck for some small little tiny click target, though you shouldn't have your cell phone in your hand. This is Pennsylvania. I think the bartender example is a little contrived for situational, but I've definitely had ear infections or tinnitus, not been able to hear things properly. If you're at a concert, maybe your ringtone or your phone has a vibrational motor for exactly this reason. Auditory input is not always easy. And maybe you have a heavy accent and Siri is not hearing you today. So having a text input would be really, really nice. I love this illustration because I think it really drives home that some of the time and eventually we're all probably going to need some of this stuff. Changing topics. Permissions, I think, are a really good way that the browser represents the user's interests online. This is an example of going to Google Maps, and you can see that I've allowed Google Maps to access my current location, and actually, in general, the Google domain can send me push notifications, something I will get into a little bit later. This is an awesome, we don't just give every web page that the user accidentally clicks on access to all of these more powerful APIs. There's a lot of stuff where it can be used to directly find you where you are right now. Super creepy if you didn't approve it. Or install a lot of sort of tracking baggage in your browser, where the next time you go to this site, you may, or you go to another website, they might be able to link you together and at best advertise you, and at worst do something creepy. So permissions are a really great way that the browser sort of intercedes on the user's behalf and works with the developer to make sure that the user is permitting sort of more security and privacy enhanced features on their online experience. I would say that the user agent concept is the idea of browsers and servers working together. It took me forever to find a graphic with computers holding hands, and this one's a GIF from like the 90s. I just wanted to take a minute and look how happy they are. They don't know the CRT's dead yet. It's very sad. How many of you are familiar with service workers? So a couple of you, and the rest of you, I get to be the person who explains service workers, and that makes me really, really happy. Because when you learn about these, your mind might be blown a little bit. Service worker, how many people are familiar with sort of app cache or sort of JavaScript caching? A few other people. Service workers is sort of the successor to app cache, based mostly on the fact that app cache was terrible. Something that I spent a lot of time discovering. It was a very poor way to really represent what sites needed, which was the ability to persist data and really build offline first experiences. So service workers are like web workers, if you're familiar with those, which is to say it is JavaScript running in a non-main thread. So this is the first time we have threading in JavaScript. If web workers, I'd love to do a whole talk on just web workers and service workers, but I'm just going to touch upon this. But service workers have extra powers. A service worker can intercept requests from the domain that installed it. So if there's a service worker on Mozilla.org, and Mozilla.org makes an AJAX request to the server, I can catch it, and I can decide whether to send it to the server or serve a response from a cache that I've created, and a cache that my JavaScript manages. When you install a service worker, I can go out and download all the assets I know you're going to need and store them into a special cache that isn't the normal browser cache and doesn't have the normal browser eviction rules. And that means when you're offline, I can make the smart decision to serve out of my cache. And maybe that means that when you request my avatar, I send down a placeholder because I never loaded it. But I can intelligently and with logic actually intercept and make different decisions about network requests. A cool example of this would be, imagine being able to have actual links on your single page app. And I intercept the links on your single page app, I pull that URL, I turn it into an API URL, I go get the JSON, the templates I already cached locally, I hydrate the templates in this thread, and I send down the HTML response. My server didn't have to render the HTML, and was able to serve the smaller data over the wire. The templates I loaded once, and I have this middleware where I'm actually acting as a template renderer that runs off the main thread, isn't janking scroll, and can actually go and make the right decisions. That sounds like a pretty cool thing, right? You can do that today! Today, it's so cool. One of the other things service workers can do is push notifications. So as a service worker can actually be running. Unlike a normal web worker, a service worker can run when the page that invoked it is closed. Now, we try to shut them down quickly so they're not constantly running in the background and taking up your battery. But they're allowed to run for a moment or two after you close, and they can be woken up for certain events. And one of those events is a server can deliver a push notification to your browser, and the service worker can wake up and decide what to do. And maybe that's download the mail and put it into a cache. Maybe that is tell the browser to display a push notification. And actually, I have a demo of that right here. So I'm going to pull that up. I think this is relatively new and cool. It's not going to work because that's not the HTTPS version of the site. This service workers require HTTPS because it's way too much power for some drive-by script to be able to put into a page. Just a heads up. OK, so Is it OK that this browser receives notifications from this page? Yes. And you can see notification permission is granted. I'm going to say, hey. Right? So a web page just told a server to send a push notification to my desktop browser, and it was displayed using the system APIs. That's not some, we actually hook into the Mac system APIs. Browsers hook into the system APIs on all the different platforms to do a proper notification that shows up in your notification drawer and does all the right stuff. Cool things, you can also say, you can actually attach events to the notification. So let me know if the user clicked to the notification. So we're going to send that again. And now that notification's in the background. But if I click it, it actually it reopens my page and actually lets me see what that page was. So the notification can reopen a web page that was closed. I can switch to an open tab if it's already open. I have the ability to run all this logic without my web page in place. I can get all kinds of stuff ready. It's unbelievably powerful, and I think it was going to change how we build sites that really are applications and feel like applications, because applications are multi-threaded. Applications can do more than one thing at once. And right now, when we've been doing more than one thing at once, we've been turning scrolling into a hot mess. So I'm glad service workers are here. I'm glad app cache was such a disaster, because it gave way to something so much better. So another thing that we're doing is reader mode. If you've seen this, raise your hand if you've seen this in Safari. The ability to remove the actual rendering of the content, take the content from the page, and present it in a much more readable way. Here's an example of an excellent clickhole article on the OK Computer anniversary. It's very, very good. And here's an example of that same article displayed in reader mode, which means that I can change the font size, change the contrast. I can do dark on light, light on dark. And starting in new version releases of Firefox, I can have it read to me. There's a little, you can see that right there. I can click that and actually have the system narrator read the page to me while highlighting stuff. So I could not only not have to look at the cruft of the site, and not even have to look at my computer. And actually have the browser talk to me. So this is an example of the browser really reading and trying to understand your website. And actually, we're using Fathom and running these rules to find this content on the page. That's sort of why I mentioned that Fathom had a couple other uses. We use Fathom to say, how do we, there seem to be a lot of p tags in that section over there. That's probably the content of the article. And we run a bunch of various rules to try to find what is the content versus something that feels more like navigation. And in this case, we actually use those link tags for previous and next or at the bottom. If this article has more than one page, we'll offer you those links right at the bottom. It's really, really cool. One other thing we're doing, and a couple browsers are doing this now, is tracking protection. Oops, sorry, I almost gave away my best slide. Tracking protection, I'm actually running it right now. Optionally, you can turn it on as an experiment in Firefox. We have a big list of sites that the only reason those cookies are installed on your site, and the only reason those scripts are run, is to follow you from page to page and see what Amazon ads Amazon products you looked at over here, so we can advertise them to you over here. That's why sometimes when you buy a wallet, they ask you if you want to buy more wallets later. We have a ways to go in advertising technology. Tracking protection blocks all that stuff. It does, however, potentially break sites. You may have JavaScript. If that JavaScript fails to run, the other JavaScript on the site might not run. So it's definitely an experimental feature, but it lets you by default load a page. And if there's JS errors on the page, we go, hey, there was something wrong. Or if you see something wrong, you can say, reload this without tracking protection. It's definitely not perfect for the lay user. But if you have a little bit of knowledge and you know that the occasional breakage is worth it, you can turn on tracking protection in Firefox nightly, and you can install the tracking protection experiment in Firefox release, and I think that's pretty great. So now it's time we've talked about a bunch of cool stuff that we're doing today, and we're going to talk about how user agents might act in the future. By the way, that text effect, where the text is that's called a mixed blend mode. It's CSS. You can do Photoshop layering in CSS now. So I'm doing like an exclusion on the text, and the text excludes the GIF underneath it. Composites in the browser. It's so cool. How many of you are familiar with this either Men in Black memory eraser or this is the Amazon Echo. It has a couple buttons, but you primarily talk to it. So right now, The Echo is programmed via what they call skills. You say, I want to install the skill for football, and then you can ask it, when's the next Eagles game, and it will tell you, and you will, re-up your anxiety medication before that date. The Echo is entirely speech, which means it takes text and reads it to you. This is not what we're used to with web pages. It's not what we're used to with web services. We're usually having that stuff displayed by some web page. The good thing is, if you were building all those nice semantic sites and encoding your data in ways where computers could understand it, people can potentially build Alexa skills that will be able to extract that information and read it to you. We're about to move away from pixels and pointers. It's finally here. We're finally going to potentially be able to say computer and have it respond. Someone, I believe it was on the John Gruber's During Fireball podcast, they coined the term Yo Dingus, which lets you talk about all of these voice assistants without accidentally triggering them. So I say to my iPhone, Yo Dingus, and that stops all the listeners of that podcast from having a bad day. And this is my favorite piece of the future, VR, or more specifically, web VR. Has anyone got a chance to play with one of the current generation of VR headsets? How about just a Google Cardboard with a cell phone in it? Yeah, awesome, right? We have a team at Mozilla that built a tool called A-Frame. And A-Frame is a way to write markup and get VR out the other side. This is not the same thing as VRML, I promise. It does a couple more things for you, including actually letting you view your VR scenes. I'm actually going to do a VR demo. If you saw my phone flicker earlier, my phone flicker on the screen earlier, it's because there's this awesome tool called AirServer that lets your computer act like an AirPlay display. It's pretty cool. Let's see if the Wi-Fi gods put up with me here. That's right. So this is an A-frame scene. I will show you the markup in a moment. You can see that as I move my phone, it looks around. Pardon the judder. I promise you it is much smoother on the display. That's the AirPlay. If I tap this and have a cardboard viewer, boom. With just HTML markup and a JavaScript library on the page, we built a VR scene and can then send that link to other people. This is actually running in a code pen. Like, this is extremely, extremely simple. There's a model of those cubes. There's a little layer for that text. And we have a skybox element where we passed a series of images for the top, the bottom, left, and right. So I think this is really, really awesome. and we froze out. That's OK. That was not expected to run forever. Cool. So that is A-Frame. I'm going to very quickly see if I can get that A-Frame demo up. One other thing that if you take nothing from this, you please take this, is please go try out A-Frame. Just hold your phone up to your face and cross your eyes if you have to. The ability to create something simple and immersive, I believe that was the composite example. Yeah, it's loading everything right now. You can see GL textures are sometimes cranky. We're going to switch that over here. Because sometimes doing things in pre-release browsers is a terrible idea. And by sometimes, I mean always. Oh, GitHub, you've seen better days. There we go. So here's the markup to the entirety of that VR demo I just showed you. So we pulled in an A-frame script. We created a scene. It has assets with a lake, the image of Portland, and then we created, this is a modeling format for that 3D little model of those cubes. Oh, of course. I am very sorry. Yes. How is... You're very welcome. So that's all of the markup to make that scene. We automatically link it to the accelerometer. If you have an Oculus or a Vive, we detect that. And we'll send it over to your head-mounted display instead. But you can always do just the simplest. If you have a computer without this, what you get is just this scene, and you can at least click and drag around. You can always preview what you've built, and then you can maybe open it on your phone later and check it out in Cardboard. So yeah, that's 23 lines of nicely formatted code to build that little scene. Underneath the hood, we're using web components, and in fact, custom elements in particular. So every single one of these special A-elements is actually underneath the hood, talking to 3JS and building out a bunch of 3D primitives, and it creates a canvas that goes inside that A scene. But you get to not think about that. But if you want to go in and mess around, you can actually access the lower level 3D primitives and do all kinds of cool stuff. So browsers are going to have to learn how to represent a user who might be going from VR website to VR website and might not want to take off their mask. We're not quite there yet. If you've done any VR demos, sort of between each experience, you take off your goggles and you switch and you put your goggles back on. And granted, that's probably good because your eyes will need a break and your stomach might need a break. However, it isn't really browsing. It isn't really navigating the web. It isn't really going from place to place. And this is a completely different topic. There's one other thing that might be coming in the future, and it's something deep learning. I am not a deep learning expert. I am not a machine learning expert. Hopefully, anyone who was interested got to check out the VR or the machine learning workshop yesterday. But the web is a graph, even though it's not written in RDF. We have all of these websites all interconnected with information about how they're interconnected. And search engines are indexing this and indexing these relationships and using these relationships to surface stuff. But what if we could have sort of a contextual model of the web? While you were browsing a site, we're able to understand in the moment if there was another page that was important to you. And not interrupt you, but offer you sort of a preemptive. The term we like to use when we talk about this in Mozilla is a forward button, but it wouldn't be just a weird forward button. It'd be some way of saying, oh, you're on this Stack Overflow page. Most people who are on this Stack Overflow page end up at this other Stack Overflow page, and then they stop looking at Stack Overflow pages. So we might be able to intuit that this isn't the solution you're looking for, and offer that information to you. Or, going from, I'm struggling grasping for straws for examples in the moment, but you can see the idea of having a sort of a contextual model of the web. If you've ever spent 3 hours accidentally one night on Wikipedia, you know what I mean. As you're reading, you go, oh, what about that topic? And all of a sudden, you're, reading about topology theory, even though you started reading about cheeseburgers. And that ability to follow the rabbit hole really, really cleanly would be great if that applied just as well to the whole web. So our goal in the long time frame, years, is to build a better understanding model of the web. And we want to do that at Mozilla without reading everyone's browsing habits. So we're currently trying to figure out how to use hard maths to, while preserving privacy, understand how users relate web pages themselves. We don't know what that is yet. The answer is not sending everyone's browsing data to us, because we really, really like not being subpoenaed and really, really, really don't want subpoenable information on our servers, amongst other reasons. We also think it's kind of cruddy to just take everyone's data and then wait to get hacked. So we are currently in the pixels and pointers era, right? Everything we do is a bunch of pixels and a finger, or a trackpad, or a mouse cursor, or a tab cursor. And I don't think we're going to be there forever. We already showed examples with like Alexa and other voice assistants of how we're moving away from that stuff, and how your website might not necessarily be consumed by something with eyes and fingers. It might be consumed by something that's trying to understand how your site relates to other sites. It might be consumed by a singularity grade intelligence that we're all part of. I hope not. But we need to understand that right now we're building sites to look at, and eventually we're going to be building sites to understand. And the ad revenue might not be as good, but hopefully the quality of the web is closer to what Douglas Adams and Tom Baker envisioned in 1990 when they thought about the idea of being able to watch television and on a lark go learn about anything they talked about. We've almost gotten there, and I think we can get there. But we need everyone in this room and the work that they do to make sure that the web we build is more understandable for users and their agents. So I hope you take that away from you. I'm going to take some questions right now, and I'm happy to take more questions over tacos. I'm actually happy to take most of the questions over tacos. But if there are any pressing questions right now, I will take them, or else you can come find me during the reception. Thank you very much. How do I got like 2 or 3 minutes, so yeah, go ahead.
Why did the semantic web fail?
What?
Why did the semantic web fail? We already have
The short answer is XML. The long answer is developer ergonomics and sort of the orthogonal nature of getting a bunch of people to voluntarily put their information online without any expectation of monetization. That's my opinion.
put it in a web browser.
What?
We all put our data in the web browser.
We do all put our data in web browsers, but the idea of voluntarily marking them up at the individual level of relationship, I think, is the thing that semantic web relied on. I will go down a deep rabbit hole with you if you're going to be at the, because I'd love to talk about that in more detail. Any other questions? I know, right? Tacos. Why would you ask a question now? All right. Thanks so much. Look forward to chatting with you guys.